Greetings, you're listening to the Idea Roastery. I'm Jason.
And I'm Herman.
So Herman, can you tell me about your first car?
So my first car was a City Golf, but like the old boxy ones that were really popular in the 2000s. It belonged to my mom, so technically not my first car that I owned, but the first car that I drove regularly. And what a car, man. Like, I see them on the road right now, and I just still am like consumed with fondness for them. There's one that parks outside of my building, and I'm like, nice. And it's also like a car that I defend when people are like, oh, we should get a 4x4. I'm like, I have driven up through Mozambique, Malawi, Namibia, Botswana. Uh, I don't think I've ever gone to Zambia in it, but these cars go everywhere. They're really cheap to repair. If they get stuck in the mud, you just kind of like put a foot out the door and give it a good shove, and off you go. And the fact that there are still so many on the road right now goes to show that they are actually fairly reliable. What about yourself? What's your first one?
It was like a Ford Fiesta, so like a little black one.
I remember that Ford Fiesta.
Yeah, it was
We went
cool.
to
Like
festivals in it.
for sure. Like and I think when I first got it, I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, what's gonna go on here? And yeah, I grew to really enjoy it. And I think it's like, the thing about owning a car for a longer time is that you get to like understand how it handles, and you get to like these little glove compartments. I think the only thing is that I think I found out at the end that there was like a USB port that I didn't know existed, and I'd been using an auxiliary cable instead, and so I was like quite upset at that, because I think it was like right in the sort of glove box compartment area. So I was like, oh man, I didn't even know this existed. You said your car broke down a lot, or was it like quite reliable, or?
So, one thing that I've come to appreciate about modern cars is that they rarely break down. And so the City Golf did have mechanical issues. However, we did buy it secondhand. Near the end of its life, it had, over 300,000 Ks on the clock. And we also lived down a 4 kilometer dirt road that just like ate cars. So, every single day going 8Ks off road in a car that is not supposed to be off road does lead to a lot of things shaking and bumping around. But despite that, it was still fairly reliable. I do remember one time, though, my brother and I were driving it, and the fuel pump stopped working.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we went to the petrol station. We bought a 2 liter Coke bottle. Well, we bought a 2 liter Coke and drank the Coke and shared it with some of the petrol attendants, and a Sir Juice, which we also shared around. And then we
Yeah.
disconnected the fuel line from the fuel pump and had it come out of the hood and onto the driver's side, where we filled up both the Sir Juice bottle and the Coke bottle with petrol, made a hole in the top of the lid of the Sir Juice bottle and stuck the fuel line into it, then hulled the bottle out of the window so gravity would do the job of the fuel pump, and then would drive like that for a couple of kilometers, and then when the petrol was empty, I'd hand it to my
Oh
brother and
wow.
he'd refill it with petrol, and then we'd screw it back on
Wow.
and drive further. So
That's crazy. Yeah, I also I remember one. So my car was like very reliable. I like the fact that it like was that. But I think towards the end of my time in Cape Town, I think I did. I think I went to a festival once, and I like the water line broke or something like that, and I didn't notice. And so for a long time, I was like just driving it, and the water would like keep going down and would like overheat and stuff. And then one day I lent it to a friend, and they drove it, and it like basically seized up the engine and overheated, and it was a bit of quite a bad dent to my pocket, as well as the car's reliability status. But I think that was more a factor of me not looking after it as well as I probably could have. But yeah, it definitely served its purpose, and I think
mm.
I did manage to fix it, and I think I
And
sold it
you're
on
not
to a
you're not
friend.
currently driving anything right now, or you don't own a car right now. You're using
No,
Zipcar, yeah?
I use Zipcars. I use Skyscanner has quite a nice rental feature, so I do find ways to get around. But most of the time, I'm using public transport or my own two legs below me. So the topics we want to talk about today is obviously cars. I think there's going to be a lot of uh, evolution over the next years. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't actually. I think it's up for debate what the
Mm.
landscape of our like countries are going to look like, and what types of cars are going to exist. Um, the I'm going to start off talking about one of the topics, and then you will go into the other one. The first one being, I think that self-driving cars are going to alter the design of cities.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what I mean by that is, if you think about cars today, or at least in South Africa and most sort of urban areas, most of the time your car is sitting in your garage, or it's sitting at home. If you have a self-driving car, what you can do is you can actually take that car, and instead of it sitting in your home at night, it can be out doing deliveries, or it can be uh, serving as an Uber driver, or it can be, going and getting itself cleaned and stuff. And what this leads, and this is something that I heard from another podcast, is that what that means is that, first of all, if you think of a city, you have like, office blocks and buildings like that. You don't actually have to have, you know, 50% of your building made up of parking, right? Instead of like driving to work and your car like sitting idle, you're going to get dropped off like you do with an Uber, and then your car's going to just like go off, and it's going to go earn you some money while you're in your office block, like working away on your laptop. And so what this means is that you won't necessarily have parking lots in cities, and
Hmm. Hmm.
you won't need to, or the parking lots are actually going to be moved outside of the city, because why would you park in like an expensive like middle of Cape Town if you can just have a car drive itself and go park, in some lower cost parking spot.
I see that. I see that. However, I think I don't believe that will be a compelling reason for people to own their own cars. Instead, I would see self-driving as a means to have, robotaxi fleets go and do all that work because looking at your car as an investment vehicle as well as a way to get yourself around isn't super tantalizing. Like if I buy myself a car, I actually don't want other people to drive in it. Like I have a car right now. Let's assume for a
Mm-hmm.
second that I could have someone go and drive that car around for me when I didn't need it during the day and pick up Uber passengers. I don't know if I would do that for a couple of reasons. The first one is that, it'll obviously lead to the vehicle depreciating significantly faster. You're putting constant miles on the clock. And the second one is just like, I think when people own things, they they want them to be nice. I don't really like
Mm.
the idea of like, some drunk girl throwing up in the back of my car. Um,
At midday.
yeah. However, and we are already seeing this in certain hubs like San Francisco, having self-driving taxi fleets makes perfect sense to me because theoretically it would reduce the amount of parking needed in a city, and it hopefully if we manage to get self-driving right, and I suspect that we will, considering it is already out in a limited capacity, it will definitely lead to a change in the amount of parking necessary in a city. Hell, I spent the first 8 years of my life in Cape Town without a car and got
Mhm.
around on the bus, public transport, longboard, walking, and Uber. Yeah, and
Mhm.
like the fact of the matter is, not to diminish the personhood of Uber drivers, but in a way, it's the same thing. It's a car that comes and picks you up and drives you
Yeah.
around, regardless of whether it's, uh, uh, person from Congo making some money
Mhm.
to send home, or a or a smart algorithm is
Mhm.
in some ways kind of immaterial.
Yeah. Do you think that there will ever be a world where there is full self-driving, where like, because obviously there's a lot of people who are like starting to make use of like Tesla's full self-driving or self-driving capabilities. I know for like transport vehicles like trucks and stuff, like I don't see a reason why you wouldn't have that
Mm-mm.
automated.
Yeah.
Is there any cases where you wouldn't have like full automation, because it just kind of makes more sense?
Well, so it really depends on where, right? So you and I talk a lot about urban design and mobility on
Mm.
this podcast, and I think that, the ideal urban design is one that there is limited need for cars, self-driving
Mm,
or otherwise. Um, I think that self-driving cars are better than cars that you drive yourself.
mm,
But the best thing would be a city that is very easy to navigate on foot or by bicycle
mm,
or by public transport. And we have a lot of really good examples of cities that do that. It's not like an unfathomable thing.
mhm.
However, Johannesburg or like suburban America or North America would be very difficult to retrofit, but not
Mm.
impossible. We've seen
Yeah.
cities that are car centric become human centric.
Mm,
I think that like there's the joke that goes around is like when you take the idea of a car and you like refine it down to the purest thing that it could be. You're like, okay, we have a car. It takes people around. Let's make it self-driving. Okay, and then just to make sure that it's affordable. Let's see if we can pull it like Uber Pool, and that drives on a specific
mm,
route. And as you refine it, you end up with trains.
mhm. Yeah.
It's like the
Yeah.
perfect self-driving car is a train, and it uses
Yeah.
mechanical action for the self-driving mechanism, which has been tried and tested over the last
Mm.
100 and something years, as opposed to, LiDAR and smart scanning.
Yeah. But I think the thing with trains that I feel is it's also a train is paid for by the government and a car is paid for by a person. So in a sense, if you look at like Elon Musk's like sort of tunnel thing in Las Vegas, it's kind of like a private sort of endeavor to make transport a little bit more effective in the face of like not being able to actually have a private person build a train.
I'll argue with you over here is that a car is only as good as the infrastructure that supports it. So in that way, cars are also funded by the government. Is someone
Mm,
needs to, build the highway infrastructure and, all that stuff. And in many ways, that stuff is like more expensive and complicated than a functional train system. I'm not to say that like I understand cars.
mm,
You go onto the fuck cars subreddit and
mm,
people will make it out to be like an entirely bad thing, and that is not the case. The fact of the matter
mm,
is having a car is very convenient, and
mhm,
it is a much nicer way in certain circumstances to get around than otherwise.
mm.
And I think with all of these things, like nuance is necessary.
Yeah.
But I I would love to be able to walk and take the train and
Yeah.
do all those
Yeah.
things. Like in London, you predominantly get around and you only rent a car when you need to get out of the city.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
I like that. I really like that.
Yeah. I think the walkability part will be a big factor in any case. I think this is it does seem to be a trend, and obviously with like built environment and construction, it takes time to build new
Yeah.
buildings and all of that. But I will also add that having thoughts about it, I think if you think of like a parking lot, for instance, and we know
Hmm.
that America has this huge sprawl problem where like 50% of the land is parking lots. But even in parking lots in like South Africa or in the UK, if you think about how they're designed, they're actually like they're not just parking lots, they're parking lots and then there's pedestrian sort of infrastructure to allow you to get to your car and back. What I like about self-driving and maybe a little bit of automation and robotics too is that if you have a car being parked by itself, you don't actually need to have lights. You don't have to have like walkways. And so you could probably park a lot more cars in a lot more sort of compact way in
Mm.
like a dark sort of alley or one of these underground tunnels. And I've seen this with a few robotics like sort of kitchen companies where it's like they're making food but you don't need to have any lights and you don't need to have like even like a space that a human would like inhabit.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could have a different kind of parking lot where it just like parks itself and it's like dark and you don't need to have, maybe you need someone to do maintenance every now and again, or if the car gets stuck.
Mm.
But like you would have a redesign of the parking lots instead of having it with all this pedestrian stuff. You just,
Yeah, I mean that is the one major upside that I think of when I think of self-driving cars is that you just remove the necessity for large amounts of parking inside of city centers. Like that space can be much better used. Yeah, even in like if you think about Cape Town, you could theoretically build a massive parking structure somewhere in Pardon Island, and then
Yeah.
your car comes and, if you own a car, comes and drops you off at your office or at the co-working space, and
Mm,
then it heads off to Pardon Island where it, checks into a darkened warehouse where another robot washes it in the dark.
mm,
And like that's actually a really neat thing because so much, even in a pretty tight city like Cape Town, so much of the land space is dedicated to parking. The sides of the
mm.
streets could be so pretty if it didn't have cars up and down them or people parked on the sidewalk. So I
Yeah.
definitely do. I definitely do see that. Do you
Yeah.
have outside of the removal of the necessity for parking, what other potential upsides do you see from self-driving?
I think, and maybe this tangents into the next section, which is the safety aspect. I think at least what Tesla is trying to push is like if you can have a fully autonomous car, you don't necessarily have to have so many car accidents, and that could potentially be a safer environment for people to live in. And obviously, in South Africa, like car deaths is one of like the leading causes of ending your life, and
Hmm.
so there is maybe a safety aspect to the way that cars will move around cities, and maybe that's what we can lead into for your section.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So cars are really safe compared to how they used to be.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if you take a look at, there's a bunch of YouTube videos that you can go and take a look at. People are like, "Oh, they used to build cars so much better back in the day." No, no, they didn't. It was just like wrought iron, whacked together, and you put the human inside of it, and they crash it into a wall, and that human gets like just smashed around the inside. Whereas modern cars are all very bulbous, and in my personal opinion, they don't look as pretty as they
Mm.
used to. Like I think cars definitely used to look cooler, but crumple zones are really neat. It's just like metal cushions all the way around you. So in that respect, cars have gotten a lot better. Um, I think with self-driving is, yeah, cars will be significantly, significantly safer. Like, yes, accidents will still happen. However, if you take a look at traffic statistics, the majority of accidents happen through people essentially breaking the law, distracted while
Mm.
driving, driving under the influence, speeding, hopping a red light, et cetera, et cetera. And this is because like humans are not built for driving. Like
Mm.
yes, we can drive recreationally and have fun, but like being stuck in traffic, no one likes it. Right. I mean,
Mm.
yesterday I was stuck in traffic getting to the iStore to replace my AirPods, and this one guy was trying to push in front of me while it was a red light for him, so I gave him a little hooty hoot, and then he
Mm.
flipped me off, and
Had a light exchange.
yeah, like it was a like a completely unnecessary thing. And the fact of the matter
Mm.
is that I'm in a anonymous box. He's in an anonymous box. It's an
Mm.
antagonistic relationship that we're in. And so because of that antagonistic relationship, people are going to get frustrated and they're going to feel
Mm.
powerless because there's no way for them to get out of this traffic. However, when I'm in the back seat of an Uber and I'm stuck in traffic, I might be like, I might be a bit late for the thing that I'm getting to, but I'm not like I'm not
Mm.
agitated. And so, I'm not going, and I also don't have the controls. I can't take them away from the driver to be like, hey, just be a bit
Mm.
more of a dick.
I was also thinking about it as like traffic is kind of comes from the fact that maybe somewhere ahead of you, maybe a kilometer, someone did like some sort of like interaction, and it causes this kind of like back ripple effect. It's like a wave that goes back of stopping, and then that causes like traffic. If you have full self-driving and you have some way where you have cars that sort of kind of talk to each other, and you have like a sort of more smarter infrastructure, maybe it would eliminate
Mm.
traffic completely, because first of all, you could kind of have like a system that automatically assigns a slot for you to go home. And I was thinking about it as maybe you would have on your app, it would just give you an assigned slot of like, hey, we'll pick you up between these times, and you get in the car and there's no traffic, and you get home in the shortest possible time. And maybe this leads a little bit back onto like why the cities will be redesigned, is because if you have everyone using self-driving or everyone's using an Uber, then like you're going to have like
Mm.
people waiting to be picked up, and people coming out of a shopping mall or from a city. I mean, obviously if there's public
Yeah.
transport, it makes it easier, but like there's going to be people that need to get home, and so maybe they would need to have some sort of assignment seat, but then you wouldn't have traffic because all of the
Yeah.
cars would like be able to sort of know that there's a block and kind of unblock themselves.
I think that's very idealistic. I don't think we'll see in our lifetime um, roads where you have to be self-driving, right?
Mm.
Like, I think that at least for the foreseeable future, the roads will have to cater to people controlling vehicles and vehicles controlling themselves. And the problem with that is that people will still be at risk because of people. And I also think, I mean, you're kind of seeing this already, is people rarely, they like cutting off the robo taxis because they know that the robo taxis will stop.
Mm.
They know that
Yeah.
they won't, get agitated at them, so they're kind of like taken advantage of.
Isn't that in the hybrid sense when you have both the autonomous cars and the like people driving themselves, right?
Mm.
Um, I think that maybe that's like an interim period where you would have this counteraction. I think the other case that I could think of is like police and ambulances and fire, because by nature like that's like an edge case, and you would need to have someone to potentially like drive through. Like I can't imagine like a self-driving fire truck like going through traffic trying to like go and like sort out a fire. So I think there will always be like non fully autonomous. But if safety is a factor, and governments do have a tendency to kind of favor more safety focused outcomes, and there is kind of like a big brother kind of aspect to it as well, where
Yeah.
maybe they would just mandate like, hey, well, this is a safe option. All cars after 2060 have to be full self-driving compatible or have some sort of self-driving. And maybe they would be kind of like you have go through like a toll booth. It's like toll booth, and
Hmm.
not that's just self-driving between like on the N2 or something and nothing else. And then maybe that would be the case, right, where you wouldn't have
Yeah.
as many traffic jams.
And I get the feeling that if people have self-driving built into their cars, most people would use it.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is that, like, when the roads are busy, that's not pleasure driving, right? So you just press the big
Mm.
old self-driving button and it takes you to your destination. However, if you are someone who enjoys driving, you can, on the weekend, turn off the self-driving and go and drive up the coast and have a merry old time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think overall that roads are going to become safer because of this.
Hmm.
And we're going to see a lot of stuff in the news where it's like self-driving car kills, 3 children. And it's like, wow, self-driving car kills 3 children is a tragedy.
Mm.
However, you know, tens of thousands of people are getting killed every single day. Maybe even, yeah, hundreds of thousands. I don't know, but many, many, many people. It's one of the leading causes of sudden death in the world
Hmm.
is just cars smacking into each other. And if we can like traffic departments would be thrilled if they could reduce just fatalities by like 5%. And I reckon
Yeah.
that, if we flipped over completely to full self-driving, it would reduce it to just 5%, right?
Mm.
Of like 95% reduction. However, there will always be opposition. There will always be people who'll be like, no, but I really like driving. And it's like, you'll still be able to drive, but just like you've got the button to not if you don't want to.
We hope that's still the case. I feel like there might be certain countries that go all in and just say like, like having your own car and driving yourself would just be like something that you do almost like a track day. Like you go into like a predefined area and you just drive around
It's
yourself.
kind of like a horse, right? Is
Yeah.
like you're not allowed to ride your horse on the road, but you can
Yeah.
like have a farm and like ride
Yeah.
your horse around the farm if you want, go on horse riding trails.
I think our generation might be the one that most affected, because if you're born like today, and by the time you get to having to get yourself around a city, like most of the time you'd be using Uber and automated driving anyway, and so you would never miss the fact that you had to like physically like move yourself along and like turn the steering wheel. It might be like
Yeah.
mundane to you. And the other factor that I wanted to just chat about is like we spoke about crumple zones. But if your safety ratings become like lower, maybe that will mean that you'll be able to have more exciting cars because a lot of the design is because of like safety factors, right?
I think there's another thing over there, and I think this is going to be a big one. Um, I could see, and this is definitely going to happen. I'm making
Mm,
a prediction over here. When self-driving becomes a normal thing, I am 100% certain that uh, health insurance and car insurance will require you to use self-driving. And if
mm,
you don't use self-driving, then you're not covered during that time.
mm. Yeah, that
And
makes a
I
lot of
mean, that's a
sense.
strong enough incentive. It's like, yeah, I want to take over the wheel
Yeah.
and drive myself, but if I have an accident during that time, then my car is not insured. So people will be like, I guess I'll just
Mm.
leave self-driving on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I feel about that. I guess yeah. I mean, it's like for the greater good and like for the safety of people, it's going to be good. But I think it's maybe just like not, maybe we have to get used to it and get used to the fact. And I think once you've had like multiple years of no fatalities, it's kind of like air travel, right? Like where you've got like airplanes,
Mm,
they're pretty safe. Like they've had like this huge safety record for like multiple years. People are fine to get in these things and fly across the oceans and stuff. But
yeah.
when you have cars that are at the same level where it's maybe there is more edge cases on the ground that would warrant having to disengage. But I think if you have a safety record that's like really stellar, you'd be like,
Mm.
well, why not? I just do that.
So I'll kind of finish up this episode by saying something controversial,
Hmm.
right? Is my controversial statement is that I get what old Elon was thinking of when he was talking about, building tunnels to drive cars through.
Hmm.
Right. Turns out the exact way that he went about it, maybe not so practical, etc., etc. But I would love to see a city where the cars are underground and all of
Hmm.
the space above ground is for humans. It's like parks between buildings instead
Yeah.
of roads. Because right now, every space between everywhere inside of a city is
Mm.
just asphalt. But
Yeah.
imagine that it was parks and trees between everywhere.
Mm.
And then if you want to take a car, you take the escalator down into, the underground, and then your car picks you up over there and off you go.
Mm.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, like it's kind of a travesty that we have so much like road around us. And I
Really, it's
mean,
because it
like,
also like leads to the city being hot, and like
yeah,
this is just this is a complete deviation from the subject, but it's also like the sounds of a city is I can hear them outside of my window, and it's like
mm,
there's nothing but transport over there. It's all cars and
yeah,
motorcycles and scooters and stuff like that. If you remove that, cities are actually fairly quiet unless you're like in part of the city that's doing industry, but like
mm,
cities should theoretically be quiet.
yeah. So in a sense, I think it will. At least the option will be there to have like some cities will probably be a little bit more ahead of the curve and they will like improve. And I mean, like I always talk about like Amsterdam where they have like a parking lot next to the city, and you
Hmm.
basically like everyone goes and parks in that like government parking lots, and then you like walk into the city of Amsterdam because it's obviously very walkable, and having all those
Yeah.
cars in there would just be a nightmare. It's also interesting to see like the congestion charge in New York, where they've like also started to move to the like, hey, if you're going to go into the city, like you're gonna have to pay more because it's just like outrageous to have all this traffic around.
100%.
And I think one of the good things about London is that the congestion charge I think does make it so that it's not always like packed full
Yep.
of traffic. There is still loads of traffic to be honest, but I think it does play its part in at least if you do want to go in town, you getting some sort of like tax for it.
Yeah. I'd be pro congestion charge in Cape Town. However, I know that those kinds of things are very unpopular, and in South
Mm,
Africa it would be really difficult to pass something like that because of the nature of South Africa, the opposition would be like, "Oh, so you're only allowed to drive if you're wealthy."
yeah, yeah,
And like that would be very unpopular politically, but I
yeah.
do agree with finding ways and to limit the number of people who drive around in town and making them pay for it is a very obvious one.
Yeah, I think Thailand they have like the odd even number plate system in some towns where it's like if you're odd number plate you can go in, and if it's not you go.
Interesting. I had never heard of that. I'll have to take a look into that.
So that I think is maybe like a easier way to at least from the policing side. I guess the other side is like deliveries and stuff. Like sometimes you got to deliver a big old box of something.
Sometimes I gotta deliver myself to the pizza parlor.
So, exactly. But anyway, I think there's a lot to look forward to in the future, and it's been good chatting.
Good chatting, my guy.